Hey, I want to talk about a few things to clean up the kettlebell dead clean today. It's where we start in our clean progression, at least at our studio. It's very easy for people to learn. It's how we want to start teaching them to get the kettlebell up to the rack position. So one of the first things we need to establish is a good, comfortable rack position. So if you've got the kettlebell, we want the knuckles either right below the ear. Some people may pull it in a little bit tighter, but if you're working with females, especially bustier girls, they're going to need to be a little bit more to the outside. We just need to be cautious that that bell is not actually rotating that arm into the broken arm position. When we look at wrist position, sometimes we will start with the spear to make sure that the wrist is in a nice neutral position and that kettlebell is at an angle in the hand versus straight across the calluses, pulling that wrist back and getting a lot of undue tension and that hyperextension. So most people will teach the clean from a hip hinge position where it's very cut from the same cloth as, say, a kettlebell swing. We start to do a little bit more of a squat because it keeps people upright and they can focus more on directing that momentum up. Now, long term we want to get them into a little bit more of a hip hinge, but I find it's just easier to teach people to get that vertical force in a dead clean when they're a little bit more squatty. So we start with the kettlebell position with the thumb facing inward. And what we want to do is use our legs by pushing through the whole foot, snapping our hips and keeping this arm tight until the momentum forces forces the elbow to bend. At that point, I usually cue people to uppercut the bell. That way, their elbow is not getting out and away from the body. They're staying tight and cleaning the kettlebell. It's not a flip of the bell, it's more of a roll. And so some people need to start learning this position from the top down, understanding the roll of the kettlebell off of the arm. Okay, another point that I want to address is that most people want to switch from barbell training to a kettlebell and use a death grip, crushing the handle. That's fine for some exercises, but when the kettlebell is rolling around the hand and that center of gravity is changing, the grip needs to be loose, because if it's too tight and that handle is trying to revolve in your palm, it's going to essentially fillet your hand. If you're using chalk, keep it minimal so that your hands are dry, but not so much that it adds a ton of friction and resistance to that kettlebell handle moving, because that'll make the tearing of your hands up even worse. So we start over top of the bell with a loose grip just in the fingertips. Thumb is facing the body so that shoulder and arm are internally rotated, and we're going to pull our shoulder down and use the momentum to drive that bell up into a clean. Okay, from the side. It's a little less hingy, just a little bit more squatty for how we teach. I know those really aren't words, but who gives a shit? This is my video. Dead clean.